this is not the end of the Warriors dynasty. Or is it?
Bigger question out of the way earlier, just how do you view your future with the Warriors heading into this offseason that feels obviously pretty unknown?
There's a lot of organizations that will only do what's best for the organization. This ain't one of them.
Can never see myself, not with those two guys.
Well, it's free agency July 1st? Yeah. Well, consider it's April 17th. Got some time.
I just want to win.
After 4 championships and 6 finals appearances, is this how it all ends for the Golden State Warriors?
I jumped on because the host of this space said, all these dynasties end ugly, and it's flatly wrong. They all end in the finals. This is rare.
What makes this Warriors team such an outlier? Like taking your last breath. One last gasp. Is that what it took? An overperformance from Stephen Curry to win the 2022 NBA championship? A championship they were supposed to lose and end their dynasty in the finals, but somehow won and thus became delusional into thinking they could continue to win. So, does that mean the dynasty has been over and running on fumes for the last 2 years, or is it not over yet? That's only one side of the discussion surrounding the Warriors at the moment. The biggest topic surrounding the Warriors is, what now? Hey, what's happening everyone? This is Switch Culture. In this video, I will be discussing the Warriors' recent season, the players' thoughts on their future with the franchise, the options moving forward, and what the front office will likely decide to do. This should give you an outlook on what the Warriors may look like in the upcoming season, so if you're interested in all that I just mentioned, be sure to like the video and subscribe to Switch Culture for the most analytical and entertaining NBA content on the planet. Now get ready. You're about to get So after spending the better part of a week coming up with and finalizing membership options and ideas, I could not get my microphone to properly record. So instead of making those announcements in this video, we'll follow up later on and make an announcement possibly in the next video, maybe after that, depending on when I can get things to work out. But anyway, on to the good stuff. It's the end of the 2024 season, and for the second year in a row, and despite it being the goal of the team, the Warriors have failed to win a championship. Despite their best efforts to build on what worked for the team in 2022, the team has been unable to recreate the formula that led to their 4th Larry O'Brien trophy in 8 years. While it is practically a foregone conclusion that the last championship was the most unlikely of the 4, the drop-off in performance is somewhat unprecedented. Following the 2022 championship, they were second-round exits the next year and were subsequently knocked out of the play-in tournament the following year. In a simplistic overview, one could say that this team has seen its best days, and a return to glory should require a rebuild that sees Steph Curry with an entirely new core. However, I'm here to share with you 2 things. 1. This isn't a problem to be solved with a simplistic approach. It is a vast and complex multi-tiered issue that requires an in-depth approach in order to reach a pragmatic solution. 2. The trio of Steph, Clay, and Draymond insist on playing together, so any rebuild that involves moving from those 2 is not a likely scenario. Add to that this recent bit by Mike Dunleavy Jr.
The financials will always come into it. It's part of the puzzle. I wouldn't say we're at a point now where we're saying we got to be on the tax or we got to be under a certain apron or anything like that. We're going to look at everything. If you've got a team that you feel can contend for a championship, you do what it takes financially.
While the general manager's thoughts and decisions are pretty important in evaluating what is going to be done, that's not always what they intend to do. Anyone remember this interview?
We love having those guys here. Jordan, especially with his contract extension, plan to have him here for 4 more years. 4 more years.
4 more years. Pause.
What I've learned is that with this organization, they are all well trained to keep their moves out of the public to avoid drama, any extra attention, unnecessary speculation or leaks, which is why they're still trying to find public enemy number 1, the individual that leaked the tape on the pool punch. According to Bob Myers, that issue has yet to be solved. We can also take that and apply it to every single player and every player quote I've used so far to take it with a grain of salt. They say what's right for the camera, and no one will ever address the elephant in the room. So with such a complex problem in Golden State, how do we even begin to address it? In order to identify the starting point, basically the point that dictates where this team goes, we start with the most obvious question. Is this team trying to win an NBA championship next year? The answer to that is almost as obvious, and it's a yes. The Warriors will be trying to win a championship because Stephen Curry is still on the roster, still playing at a high level, and the intention is to build around him. With Steph being the focal point, we can begin to branch out and find our parameters. This brings us back to our first Steph Curry quote.
I can never see myself, not with those two guys. We're not going to play forever, but I'm talking to Mike and Coach. And this league, you never know, man. For me, this is unfamiliar territory, so even to answer that question, it's like, I just want to win.
Steph Curry wants to win, but he also wants to play with Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. Considering that these guys are still high-level players, this seems reasonable enough. But then things take a bit of a left turn when you realize that both Draymond Green and Klay Thompson come with their own set of requirements. So now the plot thickens. Draymond is commanding a yearly salary of $25 million, and Klay will likely be fielding competitive offers in the off-season from teams with more salary cap, so this is a relative unknown. We'll get back to that in a bit, as Dunleavy had this to say when it came to the impact of salary on the team.
I think if you've got a team that you feel can contend for a championship, you do what it takes financially.
Basically, winning comes first. Then they try to get the salaries to work. Despite it seeming like the front office could sign Giannis and Jokic in the offseason, this isn't NBA 2K. We're looking at the most realistic path to an NBA championship. That means, not a guarantee, but what gives the Warriors the best chance to win another championship with Steph, Klay, and Draymond. Steph and Draymond are untouchable, however Klay may decide to leave depending on the offers available in free agency. Personally, if you ask me, considering the Warriors paid him to rehab injuries, he should accept something reasonable regardless of whether or not a team like the Magic or the Mavericks offer him something insane like 4-year $135 million. Again, that's out of the Warriors' control. What I'm guaranteeing, however, is that at least to start the season, Steph and Draymond are the only two players that will be in guaranteed starting spots, and it's more likely than not that Steve Kerr will retain his coaching position as he led the Warriors dynasty. While the rest of the roster isn't guaranteed, the availability of high-level players that complement Steph and Draymond will, for the most part, determine who stays and who goes. Now, despite Dunleavy stating,
vitally important that these guys take another step, because that's how we're going to balance this thing out with our more mature legacy players, with a younger core of group that can push us forward and help us win, and like Moses, JK.
This does not mean that they will be prioritized in the starting lineups. The Warriors will be looking to fill those 3 spots next to Steph Curry and Draymond Green: shooting guard, small forward, and center. While they could fill these spots with the Warriors' young core of Trace, Kuminga, Moody, that's not likely. Steph Curry's performance declined this season, and despite it not being acknowledged, Draymond's significant drop-off since the 3rd championship has been a huge factor in the increased load on Steph Curry. While Draymond plays well, the team will need to take these factors into consideration when filling out the roster. Gone are the days when you could snatch up 2 guys from LA Fitness, put them on the floor with Steph, Klay, and Dre and win a championship. First, let's look at what players are available that could help the Warriors compete for another championship. Looking at the list of free agents, we have LeBron James, Paul George, OG Anunoby, James Harden, Pascal Siakam, DeMar DeRozan, and Jonas Valanciunas. Now obviously there are more players available, but Tyrese Maxey, for example, is not leaving Philly anytime soon, and the rest I don't consider to really move the needle for the Warriors. Alternatively, with so many teams vying for a championship, there are players that might consider leaving their current team. This includes Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Brandon Ingram, and possibly a few more that I haven't mentioned. The Warriors will have to consider acquiring at least one of these players to improve the roster enough to become a championship team, barring yet another leap by Jonathan Kuminga as well as Moses Moody, Trace, and/or Pods. So how do the Warriors go about getting one or more of these players on the team? Note that the Warriors have limited options in acquiring these types of players, and that's due to the salary cap. Take for example Chris Paul. Because the Warriors held on to Chris Paul past the deadline, the Warriors lost all that salary cap originally granted when they signed Poole and traded him for Chris. This means that $31 million cap space is essentially gone. That means if they want to make the team better, they won't be able to sign any free agents unless they do a sign and trade, and aside from Chris Paul, the only non-guaranteed contracts belong to Kevon Looney and Guy Santos, too small to really get an impact player. The good thing about a sign and trade is that the player has to specifically want to come to Golden State, in which case sending over cheap returns is feasible. The Warriors wouldn't have to trade over their entire young core. One young player with salary filler is usually good enough to get a deal done. Of course, there is one player that the Warriors could get under these types of circumstances, a player they've approached at least once and have said they will pursue in free agency. That player is LeBron James. If the Warriors decided to draft Bronny James, they would have a rare opportunity to acquire LeBron James. James has a player option at this season's end, and with the Warriors' interest, they could acquire him through a sign and trade, which would see the Warriors likely send Andrew Wiggins and a future first-round pick to the Lakers. But it isn't so cut and dry. There are a few problems with this, not the least of which would be the entire Warriors fan base now having to sit amongst LeBron fans in the same jersey. But hear me out. LeBron is making twice Wiggins' salary, but with Bronny on hand, the Warriors would have some leverage. LeBron would effectively have to decline his player option and sign at a somewhat negotiated pay grade to facilitate a sign and trade deal with the Warriors. LeBron mentioned he wanted to get something in the 9-figure range, but I'm not so sure that's feasible. He'd be the first 40-year-old with a 9-figure salary. Not impossible considering he's still performing at a high level, but I don't expect the Warriors would offer anything more than a 2-year deal. A 2-year $90 million deal would be a compromise for both parties. But can the Warriors even do that? The Warriors are not allowed to exceed the first apron with a sign and trade. That means the overall salary cap would be at $179 million. With Klay's salary off the books, this brings the Warriors' payroll down to $174 million, a mere $5 million under the cap without making any other changes. What's good is this includes $30 million worth of flexibility in Chris Paul's and $8 million in Kevon Looney's non-guaranteed salaries for next season. So even with Klay's, Chris Paul's, and Kevon Looney's salaries gone, you still wouldn't have enough to sign LeBron James, not to mention you wouldn't want to give away your only backup center anyway. But we at least established there is some expendability in Looney's salary, so we'll get back to that. Let's be honest here, the Warriors are going to attempt to re-sign Klay Thompson. Klay had rejected the 2-year $48 million, and considering Klay is likely to come off the bench on any future Warriors team, that offer now could be an overpay. I'm expecting something along the lines of 2 years $30 million to 2 years $40 million for Klay, which puts him on the books for $20 million next year in the worst case scenario. So now we have the full roster to play around with. The problem here is that there won't be room to take on Chris Paul's contract if the Warriors commit to a sign and trade. The Warriors at this point need to shed $15 million, but instead of re-signing CP3, they take 10 of that $15 million, package it with Wiggins' $26 million and GP2's $9 million, that's $45 million, which they could use to sign LeBron. So the Warriors keep Klay and move Chris Paul and Wiggins to come $5 million under the first apron. It would be absolutely historical if LeBron was to play on the same team as his son. But imagine if they could win a championship together. Now this makes the Warriors offer even more tantalizing, and I'm sure it's making a lot of viewers' blood boil, but I promise there's a reason for all this detail and depth. LeBron would surely be willing to take even more of a pay cut to make sure the team gets enough talent to pretty much guarantee another championship. This is where Jonas Valanciunas comes in. It's almost a foregone conclusion that the Pelicans won't be winning a title this year, and with Valanciunas heading to free agency, he's the perfect stretch 5 that the Warriors need to put into that starting lineup. Again, he'd have to be a sign and trade, meaning he'd have to want to come to the Warriors. Fortunately, JV is one of very few centers that would get plenty of minutes with Golden State. The Warriors would have no one competing with him for minutes. He's a very good defender, shooter, presence in the paint, and at 31 years old going into free agency, he's perfectly positioned to round out the Warriors' 5-man starting lineup. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. JV is on a $15 million contract, and the Pelicans won't be able to pay him along with the rest of that roster. The Pelicans roster salary breakdown is another topic entirely, but take my word for it that the Pels are looking to shed some salary, and there isn't much they can do to retain JV after this season. The Warriors could offer JV $13 million, an opportunity for a starting spot next to LeBron James and Stephen Curry, and his best chance of winning a championship before retirement. So this would take a sign and trade deal that involves sending Kevon Looney with his $8 million contract, plus the $5 million that the Warriors saved on LeBron James. Alternatively, the Warriors could trade Moses Moody along with Looney to open up a spot on the roster to sign some cheap 3-and-D guys who are at this point clamoring to play on a team featuring both Steph Curry and LeBron James. Now, I know not many are sold on this idea of LeBron and the Warriors, but believe it or not, the team is seriously considering getting LBJ. Now let's say LeBron has no interest, or for whatever reason that plan doesn't get the go-ahead. The next option would be a sign and trade for Paul George. I've discussed the potential for the Warriors signing PG-13 in a video around the trade deadline, but to expound upon that a bit more, Paul George has yet to sign a contract extension with the Clippers, with the only reasonable explanation being that he wants to see if they could win a championship with this roster. If they don't, it's very likely he looks to move elsewhere. He slots right in for the Warriors at the small forward and is one of the better defenders in the league. Now, if you listen to the detail of the LeBron trade, this one is fairly simple. The salaries for Paul George and LeBron James are practically identical. Now, one detail I didn't add earlier is that Chris Paul's contract becomes guaranteed on the 28th of June, which is before free agency starts, so they would likely waive CP3 before the start of free agency to open up that $15 million in cap space. They could then send Wiggins and GP2 plus their second round pick to the Clippers in a sign and trade deal that would send Paul George to the Warriors. The Warriors don't need to give away much talent for this to work because the Clippers wouldn't get anything out of it anyway if PG-13 just decided to leave, although he wouldn't be able to come to the Warriors, so consider this a trade-off. In the LeBron scenario, you could have a starting lineup of Steph, Moody, LeBron, Draymond, and Valanciunas, with Clay, Pods, Santos, Kuminga, and Trace, plus Bronny coming off the bench. With Paul George, his skill set allows the Warriors to play him at the 2 next to Curry, Kuminga at the 3, Draymond at the 4, and Valanciunas at the 5. The bench would then be Pods, Clay, Moody, Santos, and Trace. Alternatively, we still could see Clay in the starting lineup if Moody doesn't show improvement next season. While the Paul George option is more likely than the LeBron option, it isn't entirely up to the Warriors. Getting Bronny in the second round when there's a chance a team could get LeBron with him is slim to none. There would have to be some type of backdoor deal to make sure Bronny gets to Golden State, and I'm assuming those are in the works. Now obviously there are other free agents that the Warriors could sign, including DeMar DeRozan, who just got an offer from the Bulls for 2 years, $80 million. DeRozan is looking for a longer term deal. But with Curry only on the books for another 2 years, I'm not certain the Warriors would be willing to offer him a longer contract. I'm fairly certain that DeRozan scoffed at the thought of playing in Golden State before, although the opportunity now is a little different. The Warriors could use a scorer like DeRozan, who's one of the league's most clutch players this season behind only Steph Curry last time I checked, and would slot in right at the small forward spot. While he's eyeing a lengthier deal, could the Warriors entice him with a bigger payday than the 2 years $80 million he was offered from the Bulls? Perhaps. But as we go further down the list of available free agents, the likelihood of a championship for Golden State greatly diminishes. In the interest of keeping this video from going on for eternity, I'll briefly mention some alternatives that are really worth talking about because there are some potential twists up ahead in the offseason. So be sure to post your thoughts on these in the comments below. If LeBron ends up leaving the Lakers for a team that drafts Bronny, Anthony Davis becomes poachable. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be poachable until next season because he just signed a max extension with the Lakers, and because of that, he's not able to sign this offseason. Embiid, Giannis, Donovan Mitchell, and even DeJounte Murray are all on trade watch, and these all depend on how the playoffs shake out. A number of these players would likely be interested in leaving, and since you now know what moves the Warriors are capable of making depending on whether a player is a free agent or not, let me know who you would like seeing on the team. If the Bucks don't win, Giannis could want out. If the Sixers don't win, they could be forced into a rebuild around Maxey, leaving Embiid to roam free. If the Cavs don't go far in the playoffs, Mitchell could see himself leaving Cleveland, and so on. Who would you like to see in a Warriors jersey? Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video, and like I said, getting one of those players I mentioned is the best chance the Warriors have of winning another championship. While there have been issues with Steve Kerr's coaching this season, he was just signed for another 2 years, and I don't think the front office will separate Kerr from Curry at this juncture in their careers. All four of Kerr, Steph, Clay, and Draymond are likely riding it out till the end. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Swish!